Right, so here's part 2 of correcting the quarter. So we found a pleasant surprise, sorta. Turns out they went real Bondo happy down here. So I took it down to where it catches the metal, feathered it off. I can work with that. There's a little bit of an uplip there, but I think we're gonna be okay with that. And when I fill from here back, and you know, it'll straighten right out around this edge off to there. But the look will be, it looks close here just because of the color of the filler, but there's plenty of gap there now. So what else to explain? So basically the doors, the top sits about where it should be. And what we did is, the guy that owns this car has a beautiful GTX of the same year. So we basically did some measurements off that car because it's perfect. Like, it's a very high dollar car, where this one's going to be like a daily driver. Literally, he doesn't want this. I mean, he didn't even want me doing half of this work. He was like, just paint it yellow. And I'm like, the whole car's wavy. Anyways, so the door is set to where it's just slightly sitting out. The adjustment would be about roughly the center. This way we can go in and out if we have to a little bit. We can also go up or down a little bit. I think I might, if you look at the body line there, you can see on the door the body line is low. So I'm going to bring the door up, because if you look at the top of the fender, now keep in mind the fender's loose, so we can adjust that anywhere we want. But if you look back here, it's also a touch. Well, it's not by much, but it's a touch low. So I might raise the whole door slightly. You know, not just tip the door up, but actually raise the whole door. Because the rocker line is very nice as far as when you look at it, you know. And I mean, you can measure all kinds of stuff, but I mean, if it don't look right, it ain't gonna look right. Make it look right. So, because we found the filler in here, we didn't have to do the cut down here. We didn't bother with any of that. And I don't know why people do this in the corners. Every time someone brings me a Dodge, that's got to be corrected or totally cut out and redone. Now, if you remember how bad the door gap was, and again, that's pretty good. If it looks a little big, keep in mind, I'm just trying to get it all the same. We can always adjust the door back a touch. But I mean, that's pretty consistent now. So what we did is I cut from here up to about there. Which is about, what, midway of the door. And basically we knocked it behind. Now I know everyone is going to say cutting, but however, the other issue we had with this fender is it was in too tight at the bottom. So by knocking this in behind, you see it allowed the fender to come out, and I'm a little bit closer to where the door should be. So what I'll do next, I'll adjust the door up so that line matches. And then I'm going to adjust the latch in a little bit, because the door is slightly out past the fender. So it'll be in a little bit. There's something holding it back, but it must just be the latch itself. And then, before we weld this up, I'm not sure exactly what I want to do with that. Normally I weld that shut, but because of where I went, sometimes there's extra steel in here when they do a repair. So I stayed back a little bit, gives us a little bit of room to play. And what we'll do is I'll put a few tacks in there to make sure it can't move, because I can pull this out just now. If you pull out too much down here, it'll suck in here, so you got to be careful with that. But I'll grab probably I'll cut some little metal slivers, the tin snips, and shove them in there ever so gently, just to bring it all out nice and equal. But you don't want a bunch of tension to oil can anything. You just want to pull it out. I'm talking a hair. And again, you could probably fill that out. There wouldn't be a lot of filler there anyways. Now, once the door is up, these two gaps should be closer, but you can see this is right about where my nail is where that is, but it should be here. So we might have to fill this and shape it. And again, we're talking, I don't know, a 1/16 of fill to get that line back. But when I put the slivers in, I wonder if I can... When this pulls out, it almost seems as though the line will match up better. But either way, we'll take care of that with a bit of filler, because, you know, we're not cutting off the bottom of the quarter and playing with it. That's crazy. Quarter's already on the car and it's welded super solid. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna do the tacks. We're gonna grind them till there's not much left of them. Then I'm gonna cut a sliver of 18 gauge to take the heat and run it right in here. And that should fit fairly flush. And this way I'll leave a little gap and we'll weld that shut. And then we'll come in here off the edge of the 18 and I'm gonna try to run it straight so that I can come beside it and fill that with weld, and that'll give us lots to grind because we want to recreate this edge. And I mean, you can have a little bit of fill there, but we're going to try to have as little as possible. And you know, it's like the door edge here. You don't want anything here and anything here on that edge, like too much fill, because getting in and out of the car, something bumps, it's going to chip off, right? So that's why I have this overlapping. We're actually going to, like I say, put a sliver of steel in there, weld it on each side, grind it flush. You'll never know that that's been touched unless somebody someday cuts it apart. Excuse me. I'm going to get up just so you can kind of... You can see how the fender came out, and it came way closer to the door. And again, it could be a little bit more. If you look at these two pieces here, they're taped, but that can come in a little bit. So we'll adjust the latch, and that should pretty much make up the difference. I mean, this whole fender is going to end up with a skim coat, a fill, 2-3 layers of the high build, and then sanded smooth. So it'll come out to the door. The door's super nice. The door's pretty much we'll seal it and shoot it. It's pretty good. I might do like 1 layer of the primer on it, 1 fat coat, and then just sand that. Won't even bother up here, just from here down, kind of, you know, the overspray, sand it off. But yeah, so that's what. So again, watch your quarter panels. I know guys like to do this at home, and there's a lot of videos showing you good stuff. Just be patient to put your trunk lid on, put your doors on, adjust them kind of where they should be. I mean, you can't line the panels up, but if you throw your trim on here, you can line up this, you can line, you know what I mean? There's a lot of things you can line up. And if you're not sure, crawl in from the other side of the car and look around your rubbers, gaps, like, you know, and look at all these things and become familiar with the car before you blow it apart and start the work. Sometimes, even though the car's a rusty turd, I mean, this thing had like no frame rails, no floors. 3 out of 4 frame rails on this car have been replaced. And the 4th one, which was this one right here, there's actually a patch put in it. You know what I mean? Complete floor pans, the trunk, all the steel in the back under the trunk and under the bumper. Like, this thing was a sloppy, shaky, twisting. Like, you could walk up to this car, and if the door wouldn't close, you could lift the fender and shut the door. Like, this car was floppy. So the guy set it up. He had jack stands everywhere. He measured off one of his other cars. He leveled everything off. He started changing parts out. And it's not bad, but sometimes as time goes on, which is what he told me anyways, you get near the end and you start to push. Now, when it came to the quarters, he had brought in an old body guy that he knew. And like he said, it was difficult to watch because, you know, the guy was like almost 80 years old at this point. You know, and where everything the guy did himself is nice, but the quarter panels, not so much, especially at the back. And I mean, at that door, look, it could be the fender, right? The way they make these fenders, who knows? You can see roller lines and machine marks and everything in these fenders. I know they're supposed to be really good quality or whatever, and they are. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, as good as the parts have gotten, and sometimes you buy cheap parts, right? Like, I know Firebirds and Camaros, most of the stuff people bring me, a lot of those parts say made in Taiwan on them, and they don't fit. You got to make things fit. So don't be afraid to cut and splice if you have to. But I mean, that would have been easier to fix and line the fender up on the other side with the door, the trunk lid in place, and everything square, and you could have kind of moved the fender in and out. Where I think what they did is they just put everything as tight as they could, thinking that's what the factory might have done. But I mean, none of this stuff was made in a Dodge factory, so things don't fit. So again, on this edge here, we've got like wow, it's actually pretty big. Well, here it's 0, and then down here it was we added quite a bit of steel in there. Now, even though this is in behind, so I welded this. You can see how I got the shape back because you want this flat edge here for that to sit on. So that's all steel, and then in here there's a little bit of filler, and I wasn't too particular back there. Again, this car is going to be a driver. You know what? The underside of this car is nice. So realistically, if you wanted a real nice 69, well, I guess it's the B body. I mean, this is a pretty nice car. It's solid. It's straight. There's zero rust. Like anything that was rusty was cut out. The metalwork wasn't terrible. But that being said, even with the repairs I've done, there isn't a lot of fill in this car, except for a few dumb things, like, you know, down in here. Well, that I ground that off because it was cracking. But I mean, realistically, it made no sense that that was even filled the way it was. Like, they could have left that the way Dodge left it. But you never know. People have different ideas, and especially when you get help. If you have people come help, you kind of watch. And like, here's another example. So if you look at this door, that's pretty much what Dodge had done. They just folded these over, right? We're on the other side. The guy had put this 1-inch wide and super fat, we believe it was seam sealer, but how he got it to look like it looked like if you took something like this and sat it in there and glued it in and painted it. It was really weird. And I guess it was to hide some tacks or whatever, but I mean, you can run a bit of seam sealer in a crack to hide it a little bit. You don't have to go crazy. So again, like, keep an eye on what you're doing and how you want stuff done. If you have people helping, communication's important. But again, the whole mock-up, tear-down mock-up, I know it sounds terrible, but I think that's the secret to straight work. Look, I'm not the greatest painter in the world, but I do a lot of daily drivers. And when people bring me these old 60s cars, I usually give them two options, and basically, and I mean the same like square body trucks and, you know, some of these cars that aren't worth as much money, but people will fix them up, right? So this is like a weekend warrior. You're going to go to the local car shows and Canadian Tire car lots and whatever. No one cares about trophies with this. There's going to be a cooler in the back and some seats, and you're going to go chill out with your buddies. Anyway, so I mean, you can do a restoration, but sometimes these cars aren't worth it. Now this one, maybe it would have been, but again, it's up to the owner. You know, like, you wouldn't put 40, 50, 60 grand to resto in this. I mean, some people would. I know TV makes it seem that way, but a lot of people don't have that kind of dough. So anyway, keep that in mind. This car is what it is. There's nothing original. The doors, this one I believe he said is original. Both front fenders are not original. And the one on the other side is actually, this one came off of a 68. So he had to cut that piece from around the marker light because the 68 had a little round one in there. So he had to weld that shut because I think it was up here somewhere. And then he had to cut that out and weld that in. It works. It fits. Same body line, just a different light. The hood on this car is off something else. We found out it was full of hail damage. I've got it all blocked so where I can see stuff. So there'll be a skim coat of filler. We'll block it. And then, you know, a few coats of primer and block it out again. The roof was rough. We sanded all the junk off it. Don't know why it was the way it was. We fixed this side. There's a little spot up in the middle. And right here, there's some paint and stuff there that's really stubborn. We're going to have to smooth that out, take that off. But anyway, I mean, it doesn't have to be a show car by no means, but you still want it to look decent. And I mean, again, I'm no painter. I can paint. I can get the job done. It'll be all right. Again, today you cut, you buff, you do all the things you got to do on a show car. So you add a couple weeks, right? But I mean, I don't have to do that with this car. We're probably going to go with a single stage Nason. It'll lay out fairly smooth. I mean, this is going to be a pretty nice car. And I bet when he's done, the car will be worth more than what he's got into it, which is, you know, kind of cool. And you'll be able to drive this anywhere. And I mean, there won't be any filler because even that corner I just fixed, we're going to put a sliver of steel in there and weld it shut. That's going to be great, actually. I'm happy I only had to make the one cut. I think I had that Dart. You can see videos of that bright red car I did. And we had to cut the bottom and top because someone had put some really good patch panels in, but they just didn't leave room for the door, so the door rubbed on stuff. So we had to cut that, knock it in. But on this one, I mean, that actually went pretty good. And I was happy to see that it relieved the fender. The fender actually, I watched as I was cutting it, the fender just sort of came out and sat there. And everything still seems really straight. So it must have been pulled in like really tight. So, you know, we've made it better, which is great. But, you know, people talk about paint-ready cars. Sometimes they don't know. Like this guy knew he had done a lot of work, and he said, but you go over the whole thing, you don't know what you'll find. For instance, we found these white marks here. The hinge, where it goes in under the trunk lid, it must have hit, so it was a little high. Now these ones sanded off. I think I can prime them and they're okay. But that little bit of white is the other primer below this primer. So it sanded off, but there was like a couple little high spots there. But when you come to this side, I wonder if you can see that. No, I won't focus on it. Anyway, I can feel this. This is a bump. We're gonna have to knock this down right where that line is. So we're probably gonna come up. Here, let me back up some. There we go, from here to here. We're gonna knock that down. Keep putting a level on it and playing with it. And hopefully, you gotta go slow. You don't wanna warp everything. But even if you just knock this down and then knock this down abrupt, fill it. I mean, you could get a wheel, I guess, and spin that. What do you call it? The shrinking wheel. I've never played with one of those. I know what works for me. I know I can knock that down. And again, the filler will be probably less thick than the primer and paint that'll be on the car. So this was all redone. It was real wavy. We straightened it all out. And I mean, it's going to be nice. You don't want little waves. And I mean, yellow hides a lot, but even so. There was a low spot here and a bit of unevenness here, so I filled it again. So I should be able to block that out now. It's definitely a fun car. Corners come out. I ran straight edges across. Now some of the straight edges are a little floppy, right? So you can get that curve. This corner was way down, so we were able to fill that out and fix it. They ran almost straight across. We had to get a little bit of arc in them, so we knocked them from the inside a little bit up underneath, jammed a dolly in there and kind of knocked it up. A little bit of fill, so that came out pretty good. And keep in mind these edges, if you do have a little bit of fill, I mean, don't go crazy with it. When you put the other piece on here, like they're protected pretty good. Just stay a touch under and not a touch over, right? So stuff like that. Now this one here, you see all these dots? It's like they ran some kind of machined wheel in there to tweak the fender. I don't know what that is. Something to do with when they build it. There was a real bad one back here, and I fixed it with the fender. They're high spots, right? Like I know my one buddy said, "Oh, you had a bunch of rivets there for trim." I'm like, "No, these are new quarters, and these little bumps were in them." And most of them are out now. There's one up here. This one right here. There's a low spot and a high spot. We'll have to fix that. This one right here is really bad. The rest of those, 3 coats of primer will take care of those. You can see a low spot. And then up at the front, right near the door, it's kind of messed up there. Not as bad as the other side, but we'll fix that too. But anyway, so take your time, fit stuff, do the mock-up. If you're not happy with the mock-up, then you got to move that stuff. And I got to say, it seems like, the more work you find, the worse it is. Be patient. Lots of videos, lots of guys out there showing cool stuff. I could do shout-outs, but I'd probably do about 20 shout-outs, so I don't know. But anyway, if you fix things as you go, then you don't end up with a mess later. So this car was a little bit of a mess. I mean, considering how bad this car was 12 years ago, I know how good it is now. But even at that, that quarter shouldn't have been like that. You could have fixed that before you welded it all on, and then we wouldn't have to put a piece in there and mess around with it, right? Like I could have fit that to the door. If you look down at the rocker in the lower quarter, you can see how they it goes straight and it kind of peels out a little bit into the shape of the fender. That's definitely not what Dodge did on these. And I mean, maybe they did. I don't think they did, but yeah. So again, a little bit of fitment in the beginning. Try to get the metalwork fairly good. You're going to have to fill everything and level everything anyways. But I mean, the better the foundation, so to speak, the better everything else goes for you. If you put your filler on a little thin, it'll block out anyway if the metalwork is really, really good. Metalwork, gosh, lots of guys you could watch. So, you know, let's do a few shout outs. Fitzy's Fabrications, I believe it is. Just look up Fitzy. He does metalwork in an easy way, which is why I'm going to give him a shout out. It's logically done. It's simple. He doesn't try to make crazy parts. He'll make 3-4 parts to make a crazy part. So go check him out. If you want real nice finished work metal on really rough stuff, and you gotta like sarcasm, oh gosh, Carter. Put in Carter, you'll find him. He does a lot of old GMC trucks from like 1950 era. So check him out, Carter Metal Resto or something like that. Just write Carter, you'll find him. You got my friend Pete out there. Definitely check him out. He'll show you a lot of things. There's a lot of videos. He's a little bit R-rated, but that's all right. He gets stuff done. He tells you things. A lot of people do a lot of different bondos, a lot of different fillers. I use this, and here's another shout out. I use this because Sylvester Customs, check him out. And now it'll be overwhelming to watch him if you're kind of new at all this. He's really particular and he does amazing work. But I mean, depending where you live and what things cost and what the budgets are and so on and what the cars are worth, you know, but check him out. The nice thing with the primer I just showed you, the CRE 321, it'll seal. It's an epoxy primer and it blocks really well and it is heavy and thick. So a good product, right? You don't need a sealer and a primer and a whole bunch of other stuff. It'll kind of do everything you need it to do. But anyway, and you know, for paint techniques and whatnot, there's a few different guys out there. The guy that does Paint Society, check out Paint Society. He explains things really well, shows a lot of things and a lot of tricks. I mean, I did this way back in the early 90s from old guys that did stuff in the 70s and 80s. And look, back then, metal, you didn't buy all this sheet metal. You just cut it out of pieces, welded it, or riveted on for that matter. You filled everything with filler, right? So when I was learning, I was kind of right around that time where let's do less filler and more metal work. So I'm pretty good with the fab, metal fab. Nowhere near like that Carter guy, so check him out for sure. But he'll show you how to do really nice work. And I mean, if you can get your stuff even 90% to where he has it, all your other work will be easy. So watch his videos, you'll learn tricks. And even if you think it's too much, don't get overwhelmed. Watch these videos, check them out, take what you can from them. You know, everybody's a little bit different, and that's okay. Don't get confused. But when you go to do your own project, some of that stuff will kick in, and you'll kind of get it. But yeah, anyway, that's it for today. That's part 2 of whatever this video thing is called today. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just kind of going over this car, fixing all the mistakes, getting it ready for paint. In case anyone wonders what that yellow is, it's not a Dodge color. This is a nostalgic car. So the guy that owns this car, he owned this car, him and his wife, like 30 years ago. Sold it, bought it back, put it together, and now I'm finishing it off. This is 1969 Corvette yellow. Now, I don't know if there's multiple Corvette yellows, but I do have a code for it somewhere on a can. But when he had this car back in the 70s, 80s, it was a rusty piece of junk. They filled it full of Bondo and they painted it Corvette yellow because you could buy some kind of paint where Corvette yellow was right on the shelf. So he wants the same color, you know, because again, nostalgia. It is a nice yellow. We're probably now that we got the, I guess it's a Roadrunner or GTX hood, we're gonna do the black around these vents. There's just a black section in the middle of the hood, so right now it looks like the whole hood was black, but it's not. That's just a high build. We got these with the 440. Now this it was a 318 car new. I mean, so it seems when you look at the VIN tags. But it's got a 69 440 Commando in it with a little bit of a cam. So it's a lot of fun. But anyway, that's enough for today. Thanks.